record on this computer, then it looks like we're totally live, like 16 as of 16 seconds ago. So I don't know how many people are going to join us today, but I'm super excited. I can't even tell you. First, I know I was gushing the second you answered. I'm going to have my phone right next to me, and if anybody asks any questions, then I will make sure to, interrupt. But just so everybody out there in YouTube land, in Facebook land, and any kind of land where you're coming across this, out of any alien outer space world, please take a moment to I just want to introduce you to Kelly Sammy. Kelly is a near-death experiencer, and she has a YouTube channel, which I posted, which is Nurture Your Soul. And we also are going to be talking, and I just want to preface what we're talking about. Just to let you know, I did post the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. We are going to be talking about her near-death experience, and I just want to give that sort of buffer into it, that if you're feeling like that is something that is in your sort of energy field right now and you're needing some help, make sure you give a call to that number. I will also list it again as we go. So, Kelly, I am so excited you're here.
I'm excited to be here. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this, so thank you.
You have been your YouTube channel, you started your YouTube channel pretty quickly after your NDE, correct? Or not?
I want to say it was a year, so I can't even remember. I mean, we'd been back from New Zealand for a little bit, so it wasn't immediately when I got back. So 11 years ago, maybe.
11 years ago? Well, why don't you just tell me your story, and I'll just jump in, and we'll tell me everything from the beginning. Go.
All right. So yeah, 12 years.
12 years ago?
Coming on 12 years, or 13, gosh, I don't even know. Anyway, 12 or 13 years ago, I committed suicide. So I'll back up a little bit and kind of talk to what led up to that, and then kind of what the experience was. And of course, it would be days, weeks, or years for us to go through everything. So I try to condense this.
Right.
But certainly jump in if I'm swerving over something that you feel is super important or impactful that you'd like me to, go a little deeper on. But I was 38 at the time, and I kind of tell people now, I didn't have this awareness then, of course, that I think I had always lived with this idea of what I call Plan D.
Okay.
So not normal thinking, struggled with anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation for about a year before committing the act of committing suicide. But prior to that, didn't have an awareness that I had those things going on. I had some life events that kind of really prefaced the anxiety and the depression. At this time, my young son and I were living in New Zealand on a very tiny remote island. I had just gone through a full-blown hysterectomy, lost a child in the process.
I'm so sorry.
Went through a really yucky divorce, had a small child by myself, which I wasn't expecting, picked up, moved to New Zealand by myself, didn't know anyone. And just one thing on top of another thing on top of another thing. And not one of them was the thing. It was just that old, saying of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I remember saying that in my head the day that I said, okay, Plan D goes into effect. And so again, I say, that's not normal. I now know this, but for probably a year or so, I was struggling with this anxiety and depression. And I was going to doctors in New Zealand and I was telling them how depressed I was, and I was talking through it. And they just kept giving me antidepressants, and it was making me sicker.
Even in New Zealand? Because I always think like New Zealand is the land of milk and honey and wonderfulness.
And it is.
And it is.
And it was. But I think like all countries, they don't understand the brain. They don't understand that you don't just feed a depressed person pills. There's a root that's not being exposed. And so even though I was going through counseling, the psychiatrist just kept making the script stronger. And I was telling him, I'm getting more depressed. I'm very concerned. I am suicidal. I was saying these things. Here's another prescription.
Oh.
So this went on for several months, and I don't even know what it was that particular day that was the straw, but I remember thinking that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and Plan D went into effect. So Plan D in my head, again, a diseased mind, not a healthy mind, was if this doesn't go this way, there's always suicide.
Right.
Which, again, not a normal way of thinking.
I will tell you, I mean, I don't know. I relate to that. I'm just, I hear it and I'm like, oh yeah, I could totally hear myself there.
Yeah, but I mean, I now
sorry, Mom.
Yeah, I now have hindsight, of course, being 2020, and can reflect back in my 20s of when I was worried about, would I make the rent? Well, if I don't, Plan D, you know, and no, that's not normal. And I didn't realize how long that story was playing in my head. But I was very aware of it that year, where the depression and anxiety was being treated and getting worse. So here I am in New Zealand. That, whatever that experience was, that particular day, that I said, okay, we go into effect.
It is, I just find it so interesting that you can't remember even what was the thing that happened. What was the thing that went down?
Yeah, there were several big things leading up to that, but and I think that, again, and as I get into the story a little deeper, none of this is of coincidence, of course. The timing, space, when it happened, why it happened, all part of our soul plan, I now understand, but on that day I didn't. So Plan D went into effect, meaning in my mind, again, a diseased mind, not a healthy mind, believed that my committing suicide and my exiting this world was actually being the most loving thing I could be for those that I love. And if there's anything anyone takes away from this opportunity to connect in this way, it's that. Because one of the biggest things I'd love to dispel by sharing this, because, you know, 12 years of telling people I killed myself.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something to brag about. I'm not doing this because I feel proud of that. I'm doing this because I feel like there's a message, and the message is, if anyone is that suicidal, they are not selfish. They truly have a diseased mind, and they truly believe that their departing is actually serving those that they loved.
Right.
And I hear people say, what a selfish thing. And I just would love to dispel and have people have a little more maybe empathy and compassion and awareness. Because when you get to that place, you really aren't wanting to hurt anyone at all. Yeah. So that particular day, I grabbed the things that I had always envisioned in my head that were necessary for me to jump in my SUV, which I knew I didn't want to do it anywhere near my family or where my son or anyone would find me. I wanted to keep myself private, and this was not a cry for help. This was definitely a, I'm leaving today.
Right.
And I love my son so much. I know his life will be better without me, which, again, disease mind.
Right.
Grabbed the few things and off I went. So I drove to a very remote part of this island that we lived on. And this island has no hospital or anything on it. It's that small, in the middle of Auckland, New Zealand, where I lived.
Okay.
And my son was safely with my partner at the time and his kids. And I knew that he would make sure my son was okay.
Right.
And off I went. And I drove myself to a spot that I didn't plan, but I knew it was remote. And I sat there and I began to take a mix of medications that I had been saving. and drinking a mix of gin and tonics, which I wasn't a drinker. So I had to go very slow, and I knew that. I knew I had to do it slowly. And so I sat there for a few hours writing suicide notes and sipping,
Oh,
taking pills.
okay.
And I had this gorgeous view of the ocean. I was sitting
Mm.
up on a bluff. And I just remember as I was writing these notes, I was also having a conversation with God. And
Okay.
having been raised Catholic, the conversation was repeatedly, I know that this God is so loving and so forgiving that no matter what happens here today, I'm going to be okay.
Uh-huh.
And as I was continuing with the suicide notes, some of which took time, the last one that I wrote was to whoever was going to find my body, apologizing that they had to take care of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And that was really important to me because I felt a sense of responsibility that somebody was
That
going
is
to
so
have to.
thoughtful. I mean, I really want to like focus on that for a minute, is just how it wasn't selfish, and how, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Dispelling this myth that it's it it's that you believe, that you think that everybody would be better off without you in their lives. And just
Yeah,
that, yeah.
yeah, and that's
Oh,
it.
Kelly, I just wish I could hug you.
Oh, thank you. And that's an important thing to take away from this, you guys, because I think everyone has struggled with some form of anxiety or depression at some point in their life,
Mhm.
whether it's from an experience, from some life trauma, or they've dealt with prolonged chemical imbalance. I mean, it can be so many
Yeah.
different mixes, you just don't know. And so compassion's really important, and how you show up to somebody going through this. I hid it. I
Ah,
was the person who you would never know I was depressed. I got up every day, made myself look presentable. I did all of the things with a smile on my face. I was always the same loving, bubbly person. And then when my whole family would go to sleep, I would climb in the shower and I would turn the hot water on and I would sit in the shower and cry, and no one
oh,
knew. No one knew.
mm,
So it's not my doctor, but I didn't even tell my partner at the time that I was going to that doctor for depression. I kept
oh,
all of that. Um, and so, again, I think it's really important to just know that depression wears many faces.
mhm,
And mine was very hidden, very hidden.
yeah,
So as I'm sitting there writing these notes and I'm thinking of this EMT or this person, this stranger that I'm on their land, or whoever's going to find me, my heart went out to them. But I also just couldn't do it somewhere where my family was going to find me. And that was that I
right,
needed them to know that I had thought that through.
right.
That was the last note. And I put those on the dashboard of my SUV. And I had brought my favorite pillow and one of my son's blankets from when he was a baby, and I
Yeah.
climbed in the back of my SUV and I laid flat, and I knew I could feel things were starting to happen in the body. And as someone who wasn't a drinker but
Mhm.
had drank, you know,
Right, right, right.
I knew this wasn't just intoxication. I was feeling other things. So I had a moment where I was a little anxious, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be scary. And then I just noticed myself start to talk to myself about my breathing, which I
Mhm.
now know is meditation, but at that time didn't. And I just told myself, pay attention to the breath. Are you still breathing? Are you still breathing? Are you still breathing? Like, I knew that when this thing left the body, somehow that meant the breath would stop. And so that's what I focused on.
Mm,
And I was also saying an internal prayer, the same prayer. I know that God is a loving, forgiving presence. Whatever happens here, I know that I'll be taken care of. That just was repeated. I now realize it was my angels and my guides and all my support systems. But again, I had no connection to them. And so I thought it was me doing this.
mhm.
I started to really notice the body, and it wasn't discomfort. I won't say it was discomfort. And I want to preface before we go into the actual experiences here.
Yes.
There are no words. You'll hear any NDE say this, but I'm going to say it again.
Yes.
There are no words I can use to describe what happened to me that you will be able to tangibly experience. But I know I do the best that I can to try and recreate it for you in the way that I can. But you'll hear me say often, these words don't do it justice.
Right.
So I want to preface with that. I just knew that there were things happening that weren't of me, but through me. And there were sensations of the body that weren't mine. There were pulling sensations and crackling and popping sensations. But I wasn't hearing it. I wasn't.
Oh,
So
that is interesting.
it wasn't a sound and it wasn't a feeling. I wasn't. So I was crackling. I was sensation. I was pulling. And this is something many have told me is different from other NDEers, and I don't know, but I very strongly know that that's what I was experiencing. Just this noticing, and then a curiosity about that, like what's noticing, and then bam, I'm out of the body and above my SUV as if there was no roof to it.
Okay.
So imagine if you were the whole top of clear and I'm this energy above, seeming to peer down at this body that's writhing and seeming to be very uncomfortable, but there's zero attachment to it. There's no emotion about it. There's no, oh, I got to get back in there. There's no sadness. There's no pain. There's no suffering. Just a curiosity like, isn't that interesting? And this crackling continued to get louder, and the sensation of this pulling. And time is not a factor in any of this. And so I don't know how long this curiosity watching that thing writher happened. Before the sensation of the crackling, the body stopped to move. I noticed that, and there was no attachment to that at all. No sadness, no, oh my gosh, I got to get back in there. What did you just do? None of that.
None of that.
There was just this, that's only, and it's not
it. Just a little, that's interesting. That's interesting.
And I don't even know that I really connected that I wasn't a body yet. I just was so curious, I guess, for lack of a better term, of the sensations that I all of a sudden was. But as soon as that became the awareness, then there was the, oh, but what's aware again? No body. And then a pulling sensation, and the cracking got louder, but I was it.
I have a question for you, because you did feel a warm, fuzzy feeling? You were overcome with peace? You were just overcome with no pain, no suffering? That's one of the things I'm hearing from you. There wasn't any pain. There wasn't any suffering.
Yeah, there was none of that. And when it was watching, and you'll hear, I talk about myself in third party a lot because I don't identify, and I'll talk more about that as we get further along. This Kelly now, I know is just a story, and I can't find her here anymore.
Right.
And yet I can. And I'll, again, very
But so
strange.
Byron Katie, you are like my soul. You're like, we're attached at the soul, I'm telling you.
It's strange to talk about, definitely. To try and give it words and meaning that makes sense, but there was just this no attachment and sensation, pulling, but I wasn't being pulled. I was the pulling. And this sense of, I describe it like if you were to shove me into a sardine can and seal it back up. That I get claustrophobic even saying it. I don't ever want to feel that version of that body again. It was as if that had just exploded and I had just become an expansion.
Wow.
And the crackling got louder, the pulling got louder. I was it. Expansion happened, and the next thing I know, I was thrust, but no body to thrust, into what I call now the abyss, this darkness.
Mm-hmm.
But there was nothing scary about it, just this presence of love like none other I can ever, ever, ever tell you. And the closest thing I ever get to describing it is the first time I held my son as a newborn and I looked into his eyes and I felt this warmth and love in my body that I never knew was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that times a gazillion.
Wow.
But I wasn't feeling it coming from something. I was it. I was it.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, that's like, that's what you are, the ocean and the drop in the ocean.
Yes. And I think the eternalness of the connection that we all have to that, even though we may or may not recognize it, is why it was so natural, because it's our truth. It's our true divine nature. And so it's, we pre-NDE can't even fathom that. Post-NDE, we can reflect on it, but we can't get back there. But we have a sense or a taste of it. Some people call it chasing the dragon, like someone who's had what I've heard described as like a heroin or a meth high, where you chase that dragon again, but you could never get that first initial high. It's the same for NDEers. Many people spend their whole lives after their NDEs trying to chase the dragon of that exact experience. You can have many beautiful experiences back in the body, but you can't recreate that while you're still here in this, apparently. So how long I stayed in this abyss or this darkness, I have no idea. I just know that I was completely at peace and would have completely been content to just that. Mm-hmm. There was no thinking. There were no thoughts. There was no body. There was no desire. There was no, where am I? There was no, where am I going? Am I in hell? Am I in heaven? There was nothing thinking. I was just love. I was just presence. I was just bliss. So the next thing I recollect is more crackling, more popping. Mm-hmm. Again, I was it, and more of a upward sensation, but it wasn't a pulling me. I was the pull. And the next thing I know, it was like, again, a further expansion into the most blissful pink I've ever known in my whole life. And I've tried to recreate it with watercolors, and you just can't.
Wow.
It's not a color we know. There were smells. I liken them to like a gardenia smell, but again, I've never been able to find that.
So were you like aware of a body? Like we were smelling at this point, or you just knew, the smell,
I wasn't smelling or seeing. I was the pink. I was the smell.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's not like there's again, it's very hard to understand. It's not like there's these eyes that are looking at this. You are it. You're the experience of it.
Right.
So, and it's all simultaneous. It's not like, oh, there's a smell. Oh, there's a sound. Oh, there's a color. Oh. I'm all of this. I'm so expanded. I'm like, sprockets of energy just exploding, because we're not limited. We're not in this linear ability to receive information like we are when we're in their body. And so we're limitless in our ability to accept and transmute all of it simultaneously without anything trying to decipher it, because there's no mind component in this.
Wow.
I know it's hard to wrap the head and the mind around. So I do the best that I can.
Well, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job.
Anyone who's had, and I think most of us have had some experience of this, whether you've started to fall asleep and you've woken up and you're like, feel like you're falling, or you've had that dream where you feel like you're flying and you're like, but I didn't have a body. I think all of us, or you've been out in the middle of the ocean doing a buoyancy thing and you're like, I am this ocean. We've all had flickers and fragments of that connection. Mm-hmm. So I think if people can at least kind of tie it to that and go, okay, that makes a little bit of sense. That's the closest thing I can kind of define what it is or what it was.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know how long I was in this pink gardenia, angelic sound that was so blissful, just so blissful, even a different type of bliss than the abyss.
That's really interesting. So a different type of bliss. I mean, have you ever tried to talk about that?
No, because the closest word that comes to it is love, and that just, you know, I have a love, I have a love-hate relationship with the word love, because we don't even scratch the surface of it. And even calling it unconditional love, I still sometimes find a struggle with that, because in the linear, we just do have condition. We do. Right. The ego has to be dualistic. And so unless you've had the experience of what true unconditional love is, it's not true unconditional love. And,
right.
Fault, but that's the closest thing I can tie to it.
Wow.
Boundless aliveness. Tony Parsons says that, and I love it.
Love that.
Sorry, Tony, stealing your little quote there, but I when I heard you say that in one of your non-dual speaks, I was like, yes, that's it. Boundless aliveness.
Boundless aliveness. I think actually that's the first time I've ever heard that. I think that's brilliant. Yeah. Thanks, Tony.
And then the other thing that I think really struck a chord with me is it isn't oneness, yet it's not two.
Oh, that's it. That actually is like really mind-blowing.
Yeah.
That's and mind-blowing.
And I'll tie it to this as I start to explain what the purpose of incarnation is, or what I was told
right
back. But in the effort of being aware of time.
Oh, I think I could talk to you forever. We could do a part 2 if you want as well.
No, I just want to be respectful to the people online. I'm fine, but I just don't want to stay too long in this area. This is my favorite spot. I could stay here, but lots of things happened. And I will say this. Mm-hmm. When I did return to my body, things continue even 12 years later to be transmuted through me that apparently happened in this experience that I wasn't told to remember at the time. Oh. And I now understand why. We're very linear. Mm-hmm. So we think, here you went, you had this experience, here's your little book of what happened today. Take that back. Mm-hmm. Well, a linear mind would have to perceive that. And if I were to try and put that in some kind of a book and read it and reference back to what happened, it could be millions of years of pages.
Right.
So what I'm finding is it comes in code or downloads when I need it. It's like the encyclopedia and the infinite wisdom is given to me just as it's necessary. So wow. I'm still getting fragments of the experience even 12 years later. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
But the next thing I am aware of from that experience was the sensation of knowing that something was calling my attention. But now an awareness that that thing was actually presenting itself as a separate body, if you will, just for my own need.
Wow. That's
my own need to understand and translate that. So nothing was ever spoken. It was all what we would call telepathic and known. Right. And there was just a knowing that it was Archangel Gabriel, and Archangel Gabriel was summoning me and even doing a gesture of follow. And there was a knowing to follow, but I still wasn't a body. But there was just this, when the thought of I'm to follow happened, the following did itself.
Oh.
There wasn't a here and a there and a come and a go. It was just, oh, bam. So the next thing I'm aware of is we're in what I call a monument, a tomb, a space that I didn't feel worthy of being in.
Oh,
There was just this, and it wasn't hierarchical and it wasn't an ego thing. It was just a, wow, am I even meant to be here? You know, kind of worthy thing, but not worthy. Again, very hard to understand. And as soon as that kind of arose, immediately it also dissipated. This is where you're to go. This is where you're to be. And I would call it what others refer to as the life review.
okay.
My 38 years was flashed almost like a video. There was no screen. I wasn't a body. Again, very hard to understand, but I just had a knowing that there's the 38 years in the story of Kelly seeming to play out. What's doing this? No curiosity about that. Oh, that was bad. Oh, that was right. Oh, that was wrong. None of that. It was just, yay. It was almost like an energy of, yay, congratulations. We saw you. We cheered you on. Look at what you did. It was like a celebration, all of it, even the stuff that we would call sinful or bad or right or wrong. It was. And some of those seemed to pause, the heavier, meatier ones, where I had soul contracts with people that were really painful. You know, I speak to this in several videos. I was molested by my maternal grandfather at the age of 3, and that was one of my very big connecting points of clearing.
Right.
There was no, I don't want to be around you, you're bad. There was none of that. It was like a energetic nobody high five, like we fulfilled that contract perfectly, and I love you.
Wait. So you met him. You're saying like you were in your life review and you met him in the life review as you were reviewing this soul contract with him.
Yes. And I had many of those with different aspects or characters in my play. But again, a lot of those downloads came after I returned to the body, but I'm aware that they happened in my NDE itself.
Yeah.
And it's getting harder and harder over the 12 years to know what did I bring back and what have I had since then? And I don't even care anymore. I just make videos as it comes up because I don't want to forget. And so there are time diaries of all this, but you know, my mind can't keep track of what happened when anymore. But I just know that, and I think this is an important key to bring forward is, again, we are very tied, right, wrong, sin, hell, bad. I can't find that anymore.
Wow.
I can't find it anymore. And I know that's really hard for people to hear, especially in these times, in these days, in these ways, these things, and these contrast where duality is playing out and there's sides and there's battles. And again, if you take anything away from this, just an openness, even if it's just a tiny little mustard seed of openness to maybe, just maybe, this is all playing out perfectly.
Right.
So that review seemed to go on. Who knows how long, but all 38
years. So you're in this, you see it. Did you see other people you had soul contracts with that you were like connected with at these times, and how many of what?
Yes, but you know, they weren't all aspects in this story of Kelly. So again, linear. Yeah, I know. Our linear wants to just look at this 38-year version, but you know, it went out, you know, it went way out into what I call the aspects, or some people want to call it reincarnation or whatever. And again, our linear mind has to think that there's some chronological order to this, but there's so many versions of us. And I'll again speak to that when I talk about how to help your brain understand that, because it's like, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go here?
All the way.
Yeah.
All the way.
So that seemed to play out, but 38 years of this lifetime seemed to be that part of that review. And again, many other things seem to have happened. And there was just this sensation of my son is the only way I can explain it. But he wasn't, he wasn't the little boy that I had just drove away from and killed myself.
Right.
He was 21 years old.
Oh.
He presented to me in a body. And he said, I still need you, Mom.
Oh.
There was just this note. This is the part that always gets me.
Yeah, no, it just as a mom, this gets me. I hear it. I'm like, ooh.
Every freaking time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, please don't be sorry. This is your life. This is real. You are like so kind to invite us into your living room and share this.
Sorry. This is the only part. It's the only part gets me every time.
Right.
And not because it's sad. It's because it's so beautiful.
Right.
He was so beautiful. And I just knew. And there was no sadness. There was no tantrum. Although I now know that there was. I didn't know it when I immediately came back to the body. But in the 12 years I've been shown, there was a bit of a tantrum apparently about going back into the body, which I think is hysterical. But doesn't surprise me because I'm a very stubborn nature human being. And so I can see how that would play out a little bit, even in a non-egoic sense.
Right.
Starting to the battle of, oh, I'm going into that body's already starting to say, okay, I'm calling you back, and the wrestle is happening, but it's not at the soul level, it's at the body level, right?
That's interesting too. That is so, I mean, whoa, oops, sorry, I dropped something.
No, I just want to make that point clear because the soul part of this.
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just, okay. I like, it's all a balancing act over here. Just a little balancing stuff, and it fell.
Just wait for your feet to go up in the air or something.
If that happens, that would be funny.
So, yeah, there was just this this knowing that I wasn't staying, and yet there wasn't a fear of that anymore.
Wow.
It's a complete, it's okay. And then there was almost like this angelic presence, but not like Archangel Gabriel where I saw things. There was just this knowing to, again, go, but no going, no body. Just the, oh, this is happening. And then the sensation of the pulling. And as we're apparently moving towards wherever that sensation was pulling back towards the physicality.
Right.
The last memory I have before returning into my body was them kind of sending me off with the message, your only role is to breathe and not resist. You're going to be okay.
Whoa.
Take this message back. And bam, back in the body. And let me tell you, that was not a comfortable feeling.
I can't even imagine, but tell me.
It wasn't a comfortable feeling, but I was in euphoria. But it was like being put back into that can, into that sardine.
Yeah.
But I was euphoric. I couldn't be sad about it or mad about it. I was so euphoric. But ironically, the EMTs at this stage are working on me. I have no idea what's happened, how they found me, any of that, no interest, no any of that. I just want to tell them how beautiful they are and how much I love them. And I'm trying to hug them and I'm trying to do all these things. And here I've just killed myself.
Right.
And I now know they just wanted to work on me. And because we were on this remote island, we're in a helicopter trying to get to the hospital. So they're trying to oxygen me and pulse ox me and all this stuff. And I'm trying to get it off to talk.
Yeah.
And in their minds, they're thinking I still want to die. And so it became a little bit of a battle until I finally just calmed down and said, okay, they're not going to hear you right now. So just chill out.
Not resist.
Yeah, breathe and not resist.
That might have been like information for like that very second. Like, don't resist.
Yeah. And I was hearing them because there's one working on me and one flying the helicopter, and they're paging ahead to the hospital, and I'm hearing him say she can't be pumped. It was too late. Like I had absorbed the medication. So they were starting to try and figure out, can they pump my stomach? And he's saying, no, we're well past that.
Okay.
So he's trying to draw blood so they can check my liver and all those things. I didn't know any of this at the time. I didn't even know pumping a stomach was a thing. Like, and they're airlifting me to the hospital. Next thing I know, we're at the hospital. They're wheeling me into the ER, and all of that stuff starts to begin. And a whole other journey of things take place in the ER, where I have visitations that I call Angelic Presences, where, these, other people were coming at me with this continual phrase of, I see you. And at the time I had no connection to what that meant. I just knew it was very loving and that it was of the other side and not of this, what appeared to be a fearful situation. And I go further into this in my own,
right. Because I want to make sure that I say that is that Kelly has, I know I said it at the beginning, but Kelly has, and isn't that hilarious? Kelly has a YouTube channel for that is called Nurture Your Soul. And I was just about to share, and it's like every angel loves to play tricks on me in a fun way. But literally, I was going to share that feather that came right before this, and it's gone. It's not here.
Oh, I love it.
I love it too. So before the interview, before we started talking during the day while I was doing my doing some different work, I looked down. It was a huge feather. It was a big feather. And I was going to show it to everybody so you could see, like, this is absolutely an angelic. They were making their presence known prior to this conversation. And now they're making it known again because it's gone.
I love it. That's the life I live. I'm sure it's a life you live too, but
yeah,
it's very normal. People who are around me, apologize in advance, but I say this all the time. You just can't make this shit up.
You just can't make this. That's exactly right. You can't make this shit up. It's true.
It's just so, the world I live in now is just nothing like the world I lived in before. And that's kind of what I want to preface, is that I'm not the same person. I'm not even remotely who I was for 38 years prior to this. I lived a life of a victim, and I felt like everything was always happening to me, which is why I could live with a plan D and go into a depression and anxiety. And here I've just committed suicide, and all I want to do is run and skip through the halls and, tell everyone how loved they are and how euphoric and beautiful this life is, and downloads. And, I see dead people and angels and guides, and they're all telling me just to trust them. And the doctors are asking me, which I think is hysterical, are you seeing or hearing anything that you shouldn't be? And that was the first time I had to trust this. And part of me was thinking, I've damaged my brain. I took all this stuff, and they're saying no. And that's my birth guide, Bernadette. I didn't know it at the time. And she's saying, and she's very real to me, just like you are right now, in a body stage. Now I don't need that, but in that time I did.
Wow.
And she's saying, breathe and don't resist and trust us. Tell them nothing. They'll lock you up.
I was just going to say, did they tell you to say nothing? Because I've heard that before. Like, if you say something, you are going to be here for a long time.
Yep. They'll lock you up.
They'll lock you up.
So part of me is trusting it, and part of me is going, oh, okay, so you're back in a body, but you have brain damage. Let's keep that quiet for a little while and figure it out.
Right.
I feel really good. And if this is what brain damage feels like, I'm kind of okay with it.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So, here I am, this person having all these experiences in the hospital. Again, for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of fast forward through some of that, but it's all on my longer version of this story.
I can't fast forward over the bee though. The bee on the trampoline when you came back and you went home.
For days, weeks after this, I was getting downloads like nobody's business. And I would just go out on our trampoline. We lived on this beautiful bluff overlooking the ocean, and we had this beautiful trampoline out in the backyard. And I would go out there and lay on it and meditate. And I would get downloads, and the bumblebees were cherubs. They were talking to me. They were, we had a relationship, and it, again, hard to put this into words, but I wasn't experiencing the bee. I was it.
Right.
If I could spend enough time being around anything, I became it. So if I laid and looked at the sky, it wasn't a me sky trampoline experience. As I laid there, the expansion happened again.
Ah,
And I explained to people that even for weeks after this, I was just vibrating.
wow.
Literally, my whole body felt like it was molecules and atoms. I felt like I could walk through walls, and I possibly could have. I never tried. My partner at the time, I would hear him on the phone debriefing his sister, who was a counselor back in the States.
Mm.
We were in New Zealand, so there was, I think, an 8 or a 10-hour time difference. And I would hear him, and I knew what she was asking. Is she okay? Like, are you keeping a close eye on her? And I would hear him say, if she wasn't making so much damn sense, I'd be worried. But he would come home from work, and I would have Post-it walls. I debunked the whole Secret movie. Like, everything that was coming through, I just had to write it down. Talking to bumblebees, seeing my dead uncle Bernie dancing around in his pajamas in the kitchen, like just so many things. I can't go through all of them because there's just not time.
Right.
But I want to talk, and I think the important message to your users and followers is about why we would even do this.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
I think that's the key here.
Yeah.
Why would we choose to incarnate?
Mm-hmm.
If 38 years of your life was so much suffering and you got out of it, you were told you're coming back to it, wouldn't you come back and be pissed off? Maybe if I didn't have a recollection of why we would do this.
Right.
So I want you to imagine, and all of us have a mirror hanging in our house somewhere.
Yeah.
I want you to go look at that mirror. Not right now, but after.
I know I can't right now, but I will later for sure.
And imagine that mirror goes forever.
Mm.
No edges, no corners, no anything. It's just mirror. It's all you can know. And that's all that is. Now, how can it know itself?
It can't.
Right? That is us. That's what we are. That's what I experienced. That expansion, that God presence.
Yep.
That oneness yet never two-ness. That is what we are. Now, it's gorgeous. It's infinite. It's everything and nothing at the same time. It is duality flipped inside out.
Wow.
How can it know itself if it's everything?
Right.
Now, hold another mirror up to that. And that's incarnation. Here I am. I am this body. Smash that mirror into a bazillion pieces or aspects that I like to call or refer to them as the mechanism of an aspect. And now I have all these contrasts. I know what it feels like to have an arm. To know love, I've got to know its dualistic component of hate. Right. To know what it feels like to have a body, I have to have no body. Right? Converse, transverse, converse, whatever. And that is incarnation. We never truly become this. We are thinking we're this. And so to think we're this is just the computer chip running a program to know itself.
Right.
Now, this ticks a lot of people off when they first hear it, but you can learn to have fun with this when you stop being so tied to outcomes and expectations and attachments. And I know that sounds easier said than done, but an unraveling process takes place as soon as there's even a tiny mustard seed of interest.
The willingness to be right. The willingness to be willing to be willing.
Yeah.
All you need. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the momentum does itself, because our only role here, let's see, tattoo, breathe and not resist.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
And then this says stay open, because that's the message that comes to me over and over. Stay open and breathe and don't resist.
I love it.
So it's so pivotal and important to me that I had it tattooed on my body this year. 12 years later, I finally got the courage to go do it.
Right.
But breathe and not resist sounds really minimalistic, and that's what I found. Everything about this incarnation is such a subtle expectation on us. We're the ones, the ego, the thing that thinks it's the thing,
Right.
is the processor that thinks it has to be the doer. And what's happened in this story of Kelly, that I refer to myself as now because I can't find that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The reactions happen, the suffering still happens, the emotion still happens, the human elements still seem to be playing out, but there's always this witness that's watching that's completely unattached to an outcome, that's just a loving presence that I seem to be in further than I am out.
I love that.
Just supports it and says, we got you, breathe and don't resist. This is going to pass right through. And that's seems to be what happens now. It's not that those contrasts or dualistic components in the yin and the yang aren't here. They're very much still here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They have to be to
right,
do this.
to have the body, to have everything that you have, right?
Yeah, this sardine can I'm back in, that I love,
right,
and appreciate and respect. By the way, I want to make that very clear. Needs it. We need each other. I say this all the time. God needs me and I need God. We can't do this without each other. We are two parts of one. So it's about making harmony with that and not resisting any component. And what I found is, we as humans, we say this all the time, God, I give you the wheel, take the wheel. And it's like sitting at the poker table with God, looking at the same set of cards, trying to play against that which is looking at your cards. As soon as you stop that battle and find the humor of it, oh, God has the cards, then I'm going to watch it play out. That becomes the comedy of the story of you.
Did you get to meet God when you were when you crossed over? Did you just meet angels? Has it kind of unraveled in a way?
God isn't something
it might
be
be a
met.
simplistic question.
No, it's so subtle that it's a good question. There I am being that. Yes, I met God. Yes. And that's an ongoing conversation. It's just not with something else anymore.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I understand that. Absolutely. Yeah.
So here I am back in the body. Everything seems to unlocked. Call it what you will, psychic, mediumship, channel, medical, intuitive. I don't care. Anytime someone asks me, can you tap into that? And I say no, the download comes. And I still to this day laugh about it because it's not mine.
Yeah.
It's not special. I'm not special. It is the most ordinary thing. And I know, again, that's going to sound really almost cliche or maybe even unkind, but I don't want anyone to ever think that I think I'm special. I don't. I am the most basic girl.
I absolutely, not that I think you're basic. I'm not saying like you're the basic bitch. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like what I'm saying is I 1,000,000% agree. And I find so much in the work that I do. And maybe you find this too, is that I'm the bridge. And then at some point, you don't need me anymore because you are on your way and you've got it.
Yes.
Which makes me so happy. Like,
same.
So I
that's
like,
why you and I connect, because we have that same heart. We're not here, and I don't mean to do anybody injustice. That's their calling or their work or whatever. So please know that we're not here wanting clients to come to us for years because they see us as a savior that's bringing them something they can't do. If I'm not guiding you to your own connected
yep,
path, I'm doing no service to what I experienced. And I know you get that.
yep, 1
I
million
feel the
percent.
same way. So I sometimes, if a client starts trying to come to me too regularly, I'm like, you're not doing your work,
Right.
because you have that. I showed you how to connect to it. And then 9 times out of 10, I'll get an email half an hour later, I got it, or whatever. And that's where my heart buzzes. Just like what you were saying, because you're not doing anyone service if they,
Right.
because we're a microphone.
Right.
I see myself as a toaster.
Toaster. I love it.
Yeah, like I'm a toaster, and I seem to have some idea of a plug that connects into something, and sometimes I unplug it and I'm just basic soccer mom out here, and then somebody says I need you, and the toaster plugs it and it does its thing, and then it unplugs. And I know people are so curious about this because it seems like such a phenomenon to them, but to you and I, it's so basic, it's so ordinary, it's so
I
vanilla.
love the toaster. I love it. It is so beautiful. I mean, and even maybe an immersion blender too. I don't know.
That's kind of fun. I like that. I make my bulletproof coffee with my immersion blender, so I can relate to that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not the doer of this
Right.
any more than I'm the doer of Kelly.
Yep.
I don't take credit for any of this. These eyes that seem to be watching all this play out, that are completely unmoved by any of it, are what we are.
Right.
And if you want to tap into that, I'll tell you the easiest way to tap into that.
Well, that's amazing.
What is noticing you're noticing? What's noticing you noticing? We call it awareness, but what is that? Go there, stand in a mirror and ask it. What is noticing me noticing? What is noticing me noticing this thing I call me? Sit with that.
I love that. I think that is amazing advice. And I think that is like so worth its weight in gold. And just like that idea of who, I have a friend who says, like, we've played the ultimate trick on ourselves. The ultimate trick is, how did we get all that, everything that is, to understand that it's having this experience of all that is back to itself.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. And that, what you just said, as you were saying it, I was seeing the infinity symbol.
Yeah.
Right. It's just this loop. It's an endless loop. And I tell a lot of my clients, and again, at first it may piss you off, but then the truth sets you free. Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's no more than a Mario Kart screen. You're this little Mario brother that seems to be jumping over the barrels and grabbing the bananas, and and then all of a sudden, new screen. And we all have it. We call it deja vu, or we say this feels familiar, or I feel like I've been here. Well, you have a bazillion times in a bazillion aspects, all happening simultaneously. The linear mind wants to make structure out of it, so it sees time and space and all these supposed universal laws that aren't even true, but they